Hi there and welcome back to Japan to a slightly different episode because today history was made by Scandal. Yes, by Scandal. In case you didn't know, which I'm assuming you probably do if you clicked on this video, Scandal today gained a Guinness World Record for being the longest running continuous single lineup female band. Sounds like a lot of things to explain, but this is basically meaning they are the band that has lasted for the longest time with the same lineup. No changes at all. So the familiar faces of Mami, Haruna, Rina and Tomomi, we kind of just think of them as being familiar, but it's so hard to sometimes put into context that that's actually something very special. This is a band who've managed to go through all these things together and starting from such a young age, starting in school. This is a band who've basically spent their adult lives together. You know, it was also Rina's 32nd birthday today, and just seeing her getting this award whilst being 32 years old, having been part of this band for her entire adult life. And she was not the only one who was a little bit emotional, especially Mami as well. This was a really big moment. So I'm going to have a little bit of a long form talk about this today. Just talk about some of the interesting thoughts that this brings up, because this is just, it goes beyond Scandal. I mean, it's interesting for Scandal, but it kind of goes beyond Scandal. So let's just have a little breakdown and talk about some of the interesting things about this amazing landmark. Now, the award presentation was done right before they played a live show tonight, and it was streamed online so that everyone could take a little look at this momentous occasion, which I thought was a really nice touch, by the way. And it was interesting when you looked in the chat there, was coming up the side, there were so many people who seemed to not really know, oh, is this a live show? Is this just a presentation? But there was also a lot of people saying, I can't believe it's been 17 years, and people trying to quantify that figure. And that's actually, even for someone like me, I mean, I was in Japan. I didn't live here at the time, but I was in Japan when Scandal debuted, and even for me, it's like putting together how long they've been around is kind of amazing. I think that's partly because of the fact that obviously Japanese people, Scandal almost doubling in this case, seem not to age as quick as, you know, the rest of us. Therefore, they still look incredibly young. I'm looking at them like, you know, how is Rina 32 and how has this band been together for 17 years? But still, it is hard to quantify that figure. And I was thinking so much about, you know, how can we think about these numbers? And of course, you know, you got things like if you were born on the day that Scandal professionally came together as a group. Apparently in most countries you would be able to get a driving license, according to this Wikipedia entry, which is really interesting, I guess. It's also the age, apparently in America, that you can rent an R-rated movie. I didn't know that. Interesting facts. It's also the longest gestation period for a cicada. You know, some cicadas, the longest living cicadas, 17 years, they spend that time. So if you think about that, cicadas, there have been cicadas who've gone through their entire life cycle. No cicada has ever gone through a life cycle that lasted longer than Scandal's existence. Sounds like I'm getting off topic here, doesn't it? But the interesting thing is that when you think about these sort of milestones of age, I mean, look, for example, when people get really old, what's the one thing they always ask when you've got someone who's lived to like 115 years old? There's always the reporter who's asking them, what's the secret of your success? How have you managed to live so long? You know, these very sort of obvious questions. And that's kind of what came to mind when I was thinking of Scandal. It's like, how have they managed to exist this long? What is the secret behind it? I know we look at them and just think, well, obviously they're friends, but what about them has made them the longest lasting female group? To really grasp how they've achieved such an amazing thing, I think first of all we have to look at why so many bands, well, no other female band has ever made it this long with the exact same lineup. And often when we think about bands breaking up or leaving or losing a member, there's a whole plethora, a whole multitude of reasons why that could be. But the one phrase that you always hear, at least toted out in the media or to the fans as a stock response, is creative differences. And although, once again, that can mean a plethora of things, what it usually just means is that the people in the band don't agree on the direction of the band, or they don't agree on what each member's doing. This is often the thing that comes up as well. Maybe one member wants to write more of the songs, but another member's perhaps already the core writer, and, you know, there's a disagreement on who does that. Or, you know, someone's having too much fame in the media if it's a really famous group and the other person's feeling overshadowed. It can be all kinds of reasons, but it generally comes down to that sort of feeling that not everyone feels like they fit in together. And that's a very hard thing to do because, a group is a very complicated thing. You have the creative side where you got to work together. You have the media side on a sort of more celebrity level, which is, shouldn't be such a big thing, but it can be. But of course, the other thing is that you have to basically be family. You have to live together. You have to tour with each other. If you're playing so many shows. I mean, this is another thing about the achievement that's worth pointing out as a quick tangent. Is remember that them being the longest running female band, it's not. I don't think they would have got that award if there had been some hiatus in the middle of their career where they went away for 2 or 3 years. I don't think you could be some band who was around in the 80s and then went on a hiatus for 20 years, didn't technically break up, come back and collect this award. It's not going to happen. The point is that Scandal have been Scandal throughout this entire period. They've been Scandal. That hasn't changed. Which means they've been doing this. They've been touring together. They've effectively been each other's family since they left school. And that, to me, says a huge amount about the dynamic between the people. Now, of course, we often as fans, we like to watch interviews, we see a lot of things, and we really get a good feeling for the characters of the people who are in the band. But it's always hard to know exactly what people are like in private, especially when people have got such a storied history with each other. But it says something about just how tight they are, that they've managed to achieve this, that they've managed to do what in any circle is difficult, mixing work and pleasure. Because let's face it, touring is work. You have to be serious. There are schedules that have to be kept. There's quality of work that has to be achieved. At the same time, you're having fun. You're the people you see most of the time, so you have to spend your shared time with each other. You might have other friends, but so you get my point. Is that the fact they've mixed so many things? I think one of the key things that probably helps this most of all is the lack of ego. Now, you can tell this straight away by the fact that the lead guitarist and the lead singer, the two people usually most responsible for breaking up bands, from ego at least. In this case, you've got Haruna, who is very sort of mild-mannered. She's the lead singer, but she gladly lets the other members sing lead on various songs. I mean, I say lets, it's probably not even like she's got any control. It just seems to be sort of gifted out to whoever wants to sing the songs. She's just sort of nominally the lead singer because that seems to be where she fits in the band. And the same thing for Mami. I mean, Mami is a lead guitarist. It's not like one of those bands where the lead guitarist will go and have their 15-minute solo and break out. She just kind of, everything she plays fits in with the band. And this is the thing, is that they work like a well-oiled machine. It feels like everything is done to serve the band rather than to serve any particular member's egos. But they don't restrict each other from having their moments. You look at the live performances, you'll see, as we did when we did a Twitch reaction stream the other night, Rena doing a 7.5-minute drum solo just in the middle of a show. Mami occasionally will go up on stage and perform a song solo, as I've now seen. I didn't even realise that till recently. And it is just amazing that there clearly is such a balance in the group. Now, the funny thing is often the school of thinking on these things is that the strongest bands last the longest period of time is when there's kind of a hierarchical thing where everyone knows their exact place. These two people maybe are the songwriters. This person always plays this bit. This person always plays that bit. Guitar solos never go beyond this range. But the thing which is, range of time, they never get too over exorbitant. But the thing which makes Scandal so interesting is that they seem to have achieved a sort of a balance by going the complete opposite, by being entirely free, by allowing all members to write songs, to sing. It feels like everyone is free to do what they want. No one feels overshadowed. And, that's probably one of the things that makes it so amazing, is that they don't really seem to need a particularly structured approach. They just do it and they love it. And this is also reflected by when you look at things like De Bondo. Didn't think I was going to bring that up, did you? De Bondo, where you just have let's have a 2-piece rap group just on the side. Why not? It is the fact that they seem to just be loving it, and there seems to be no egos to hurt. There seems to be no one who's scared that they're going to be overshadowed. They're just enjoying it, and they're clearly good enough friends to know they're going to keep on doing this thing forever, seemingly. I mean, however long this does last, there is a sense that it will end not because of any conflict, but just because they feel it's time to end, if that day ever comes. Someone in the chat was saying, they could probably go as long as the Rolling Stones. I wouldn't doubt it, but I wonder what other, things might come up in their life, but I don't think they'll ever end due to conflict. I think They just seem to be very free and very comfortable. Now, what particularly surprises me about that is, of course, going back to the fact that they started this band in school. Now, I don't know about you. I think I was pretty average when it came to maturity for school age, but let's be honest. Do many of us know people from our school who we still get along with? Do many of us know 3 people from our school who we still get along with, who we'd still be working with fine and happily and basically living together with? It's amazing. There clearly was a maturity from a very young age, and they clearly were just people, the right people in the right place and the right time. And there's always going to be a certain degree of randomness to how groups come together, but they just seem to be the perfect storm of people. So for me, there is just something about them which is so hard to emulate or create or organize. You can take bands and you can give them a structure that will make them last, but it's very rare to get 4 people where you just go, no, intrinsically, innately, this band will last. Just something about their personalities, probably nuances to the way they behave and the way they balance out as a group that we might be able to get glimpses of from media, but we'll never truly know. There's just something about the way that they are as a group, which just in their heads they know, yeah, this is going to work and it's going to keep on working. But for all this fun and slightly speculative talk, we can't really discuss this issue without really talking about one of the biggest things about bands that go on for a long time, which is, of course, the music. Now, as I mentioned, one of the things that makes Scandal so fun is the fact that they can do things like side projects. You know, you can have things where Rena can get up and play keyboard on stage, and you know they can do really different styles of music. That is a benefit and part of them being such free characters, and you know, so open to trying new things. But you know, at the same time, you do have to play many shows, and at many shows you're going to have to play certain hits, and so there's going to be certain songs that you're going to have to play over and over again. And as much as you might love the response the crowd gets, you're going to probably get a bit bored of them. So there has to be a certain maturity to a band who keep on going this long, knowing that they're always going to be kind of playing certain songs over and over and over and over again. So I think there's a degree of maturity comes in there, but I do think that their flexibility with sound has been a big help as well. Yes, now there is a core Scandal sound. We do know there's that sort of melodic rock and roll thing, which is often never far from the surface. And it's one of the things that makes them so palatable and likable is the fact that they were very much at the beginning of this whole girls rock thing. I know there had been girls rock before, but they were very much at the beginning of having girls rock bands where all female members, of course, they eventually ended up writing their own songs, playing all their own instruments. You know, nothing fake about it. It is, you know, they're actually a band, but they also have the look and image and everything as well. But it's the fact that despite having this core rock and roll sound and this core attention to melody, they have gone off in other directions. You know, you get things like on the album Yellow, where there's a slightly more American influence in things, there's a little bit more sheen to it. You get albums like Mirror, where it's a little bit more experimental. They're playing with different sounds, things that are maybe not so much band produced, a little bit more sort of spaced out and airy stuff. And even if you look at Kiss for the Darkness, of course, they're playing a little bit more of electronic sounds. You know, still that's an album which is pretty rocking for most of it, but it has some poppy moments on there as well. You know, Pin Hill Surfer, a song that kind of goes into a very poppy area in places. All of these songs, they have the hallmarks of songs written by a band and a band who appreciates rock and roll and melodies, but they also have a sense of playfulness, a sense of freedom, a sense of not being overly stuck in a sound. I often worry about this with heavier bands, is that when they do stuff that's light, it's always seen as, oh, you're taking a deviation, a holiday way, but you're really a heavy band. You know, your fans like you for being heavy. But when you're a rock and roll band like Scandal, where you know, heaviness is not intrinsically part of your sound, just melody is, you know, melody's the core thing people expect from you. It feels like you're open, you're free to do more moods. You can have heavier songs, you can have your AMD KJs. You can also have much lighter songs. You can have your ballads, you know, your Eternals. You can have your One More Times to give you a little bit of a pop feeling. You can have such a selection of different types of songs. The only thing that seems to really matter to your sound is just make it melodic, you know, make it interesting. And again, this is probably helped by having multiple writers, but this is all part of why I think Scandal just, they're one of those groups where it's easy for them to keep on going because they have so many different songs in their catalogue, because of the fact that it probably feels less repetitive for them. As much as I like a lot of heavier music, I do sort of sometimes feel for bands in heavier. If you're in a heavier band, if you love doing heavy songs, there might be some weeks where you just feel like, I just want to just chill out and listen to something light. But it's like, I got to play another 3 shows this week where I got to headbang and play music so loud that it's going to blow my eardrums out. Even the heaviest people occasionally just going to have a week where they just listen to some more chilled out music. But when you're in a band like Scandal, you'll have your heavy songs, your light songs. As I said, you're going to have a mixture of everything. So yeah, for me, the range of music they produce as well is another thing that can't be overlooked. That I'm sure is really very helpful to their longevity. Now, looking at the presentation itself, it was very nicely done. Pretty much by the numbers, but I kind of liked that. There was no need for anything over the top. They had the girls on the stage, obviously pre-show, standing at the front of the stage, and then they had a little presentation where they were talked through the history of the band, which was nice as well. I mean, we've kind of heard most of their story before, and there were some things, because it was quite quick in Japanese, I didn't quite pick up all of it, but I picked up some of it. And, so I think most of what I gathered we'd heard before, but it was nice to hear them recounting their history. And then they had the lady come out from Guinness. I was wondering whether it was going to be like an Irish guy. It wasn't. Someone from Guinness, Japan, I assume, coming out with the the framed, not so much a plaque, but certificate to present to them. And it was interesting. I think everyone was saying they expected Tomomi to be the one who cried, because Tomomi, she does like a few tears. We can give her Osaka Joe Hall, but she does like a few tears. Rina got quite emotional as well. But I think her birthday as well was probably a factor in that. And it turned out to be Mami was the one who was, she really held on to it, but she needed quite a long bit of silence. She needed a little bit of moment to walk around and sort of let that all out. It was interesting because when the presentation first happened, when the certificate was brought out, I noticed Mami because she was the furthest away from the certificate, I seem to remember. But I remember her body language the most relaxed. Everyone was really looking in, and Mami kind of looked a little bit more just a little bit more backed off. And I wasn't sure, is it just a general nonchalance, or was she reacting a little bit more internally? And I think that came very much into clarity when they turned to her, and it was pretty clear that she was just having a little bit of trouble sort of computing it all, and you could see how much it meant to her, which I thought was lovely. Obviously, Big Boss Haruna was very much in control, the first one to talk. She delivered her little speech, but Mami went last. And I think also as well, the fact that cumulatively, Haruna got hers out the way, but Mami had to wait to speak, and so she probably had the biggest time to emotionally build up to it. It was lovely though, seeing that. I liked that it was simple. It was nice when they had a little not fireworks, they were like a ticker tape thing popped up, a little explosion. That was kind of a sweet little moment, and the Guinness thing behind them. Not a pint, the Guinness Awards thing. It was really nice seeing that. There was just a good atmosphere and feel to the whole thing, which I think was nice that it was simple, that you just got to see their personalities, their reactions very much at the front and center of it. But yeah, I was really taken just by how each of them reacted, but especially Mami. You could see how much it meant to her. And then, of course, they went to play the show. I believe the show is actually going to be available online later on, but it wasn't available at the time. We didn't get to see it live. However, that's okay. We can see live shows anytime, online or anything. There's videos everywhere. The most important thing is we really saw a piece of history today. And for me, that is incredibly important. I can barely sort of word how important I think that is. That we got to see Scandal doing something that, who knows if we'll ever see that again. I mean, if someone said to me, Bandmate will be around for 17 years, I can believe that. But the funny thing is, if Bandmate are around for 17 years, I think at that point, Scandal will still be around for 24. It's one of those things where I think now that Scandal are up front of this, one day they might be supplanted. But I think even if other bands match them, they got a while to go before we see the end of Scandal. I might be wrong. I really don't know. It could be that now they've crossed this barrier. Maybe one member's like, okay, I just wanted to do that. Now I'm gonna finish up next year. We never know. However, I just kind of feel like Scandal have been doing this, and they just seem to be happy. It could well be that we get to this point and, yeah, like I say, they've achieved this and maybe they look back and go, well, I've given a lot of my life to this. I'm in my 30s, now I want to do other things. We never really know. However, I don't think, as I said earlier, I don't think that if and when we see an end to Scandal, I don't think it will be any form of conflict. I think it will just be when the band have decided now's the time for something else. And that day may never come. The only thing that really matters, in my opinion, is they're happy. And they just look like they're happy, you know, and I think that's how we got to where we are today. By a band who mysteriously function happily. Obviously, I've worked with a lot of small bands, I've worked with a lot of upcoming bands, I've worked with some signed bands as well. I've seen why bands break up. I've seen bands who have not broken up, but you can see the conflict, you know, like a broken marriage kicking in. And it's amazing when you look at this band that they don't seem to suffer from any of the problems that other bands tend to. In fact, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I gave the marriage example. I'm going to check that, as this is more of a long form video than we usually do. Average length of marriages in the US, because I was going to say the UK, but I'm going to go in the US. On average, 19.9 years. So just under 20 years is the average length of a marriage. So in other words, Scandal, 4 people have nearly managed to match the US national average for length of marriages, which is how long 2 people can last together. So there you go. That's a stat show. I don't know if that really proves anything, but it's an interesting piece of context. Yeah, I think today's news was brilliant for Japanese music industry. For the girls rock scene as well. I know obviously the longest male rock band is quite a lot longer. Still, I think it's a great sign for the girls rock scene, because of course that's, you know, when we talk about, you know, guys rock bands have been going for longer, that's only because if you go back sort of 30, 40 years, you know, most bands were guy bands. There were less of this kind of band who were all female. So I think they blazed a trail really when they came out. You know, they took a scene that was already kind of bubbling. You know, we had bands before them. You know, we had things like Zone, but Zone were kind of a crossover from kind of a pop group who just happened to play instruments. You had things like Puffy, who were laying a lot of the groundwork for that kind of rock music, but they were essentially a singing duet. And of course, then you had the harder bands as well. The Shoyas and things like that, who were doing more sort of like the almost Visual K style or the heavier rock. But just to have, look, we're a straight band who just play rock. You know, and other bands came out around the same time. And yeah, you had like Stereo Pony, of course, before that you had Chatmonchi. But I think Scandal, although maybe they didn't have an immediate like blasting effect, I think they started a snowball effect that they've kept rolling. And in a way, their longevity and their continuation is one of the things that I think has helped give a backbone to this whole Japanese girls rock bands revolution. I mean, yes, we've seen other bands who've burst way beyond them in fame. You know, I mean, again, I know it's not the same thing, but of course, Babe Metal had a massive effect on blasting the Japanese rock scene out to other countries. But then, of course, we mentioned earlier Bandmade. Bandmade are currently much more, you know, they're much bigger internationally than Scandal are. But, you know, these things I think are all very much built on a foundation that Scandal have created. And even though Scandal, you know, they might not be the most famous one anymore. I mean, crikey, how many bands maintain, you know, sort of charting success when they're 17 years old? I mean, they're still doing pretty well. They're still shifting a lot of copies, that's for sure. But the one thing that is true is that they've managed to go through all these variations whilst maintaining a level of quality. They've never sound like they've just given up and just phoning in. They never feel like they're just touring for the sake of it. They always feel like they've got another thing they want to do, another creative project. They feel free to do it, and yet they've maintained the core qualities we go to them for. You know, good songwriting, catchy choruses, interesting changes of sound, you know, a lack of complacency. And that's how they've managed to maintain a fan base who stuck with them. You know, their fans have stuck with them because you always know you're going to get what you want, but the quality is going to maintain. And so for me, yeah, Scandal are that rare thing. And so much of what we enjoy on this channel and what I think most of us enjoy of Japanese music, owes a certain debt. How much is always hard to tell, but owes a certain debt to the longevity of bands like Scandal, who were there when the scene really changed and stuck around. You know, I mean, if they had disappeared like Stereopony, Chatmonchi, I wonder what that would have done to the scene. Would the scene just have felt like quick turnover? But it's the bands like them who stay that really give a solidity, a rigidity to the scene and to how serious it is. Because any scene to become a long-term thing kind of has to have its legends. You know, it's groups that are just like the OGs of the group, and that's what Scandal have become. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Looking forward to seeing what you guys say. As always, get into the comments, tell me what you think. I know it's been a bit of a ramble, but I thought this was just an interesting topic where I just kind of wanted to just sort of talk about it, because there was, again, a lot of thoughts came up around this, and it was just such an interesting event. So looking forward to seeing what you guys say, as always. And until I hopefully see you very soon in Japan for the next one of these. For now, ciao, ciao.